Today I'll be reading Chapter 4 of Only Fools Rush In, a college AU by Vindicated Virgil on Tumblr, Bookish Panda on AO3. Trigger warnings for this chapter include mentions of sex, no descriptions, and a suicide attempt mention. Please proceed with caution. Chapter 4. We deserve happiness too. Logan sat at their usual table at the cafe, his laptop in front of him as he typed quickly. With every opening of the door, the bell above it dinging annoyingly, he glanced up, but found himself disappointed when he didn't see his partner. He worried that Janice's oolong tea would grow cold as he took a sip of his own black coffee, and turned his focus to the research paper he was working on. Eventually, he felt Janice's lips pressed to his cheeks, and then his body slid into the booth to the left of him. Sorry that I'm late, Lo. Virgil was having a rough night, and I needed to make sure he was going to be okay, he explained, picking up the mug of tea in his hands and taking a sip. Janice made no indication that the tea was too cold or hot. He just smiled before pulling his own laptop out of his bag. How's the paper coming? Almost done. Just need to edit the footnotes. Logan responded plainly, taking another sip of his coffee. It was almost to the point where it was too cold to drink, but he needed the caffeine if he wanted to finish his work for the weekend. Is Virgil going to be okay now? I think so. Roman was arriving to practice for the auditions as I left, though I don't think he saw me. He seemed pretty focused as he ran up the stairs. He responded, starting to type on his laptop. Have you eaten anything, Lo? You can't just have coffee. I'm not hungry, the taller man responded, pushing his glasses up further on his nose. Janice frowned, then slid out of their booth and walked over to the main counter. Logan sighed, switching tabs to his research notes. He skimmed for the information he needed, and by the time he had inserted a quote into the main paper, Janice had returned with 2 muffins. 1 blueberry, 1 banana nut. Logan wanted to ignore the grumble in his stomach, but he knew Janice would bug him until he ate something, so he picked up the blueberry muffin and unwrapped it before taking a bite. Thanks, Janice. He continued writing, taking occasional bites of the muffin, and Janice was also working hard. His banana nut muffin consumed rather quickly, the oolong tea drained from the mug. Finally, Logan spoke again. Did Remus tell you where he was planning on taking Patton today? The botanical gardens, and then here for lunch, I think, Janice responded. He seemed to be in deep thought, his thoughts miles away. He's going to tell Patton about his past, I think. He should, before Roman beats him to it, Logan said, loosening his tie. He almost did last night when we were helping him pick out his outfit. He sighed, and felt Janice's fingers trail on his thigh, and met his eyes. They're all falling in love, aren't they? How weird is that? Love and romance, such silly concepts. Janice mused, a playful smile crossing his face. But they all deserve it. Happiness. We found our own kind of happiness. They get to find theirs now. Logan nodded, stretching his arms a little bit. We're not broken, right? Logan's voice was hesitant when he asked the question, and Janice frowned at him, taking his hand. Lo, we've been over this. Just because love and romance aren't things we want to or can feel, doesn't mean we're broken. Janice's words were like a song that Logan needed to play over and over, and he wondered if that feeling would ever disappear. Sometimes, when he curled up in Janice's arms, he almost felt whole, like he realized there wasn't a black hole where his heart should be. There were days where he shut himself off from the world, hiding in his room that was littered with paper and science equipment, because he wasn't sure if he could ever deserve to be the happiness he felt when Janice was next to him. Lo. Janice's voice was calling him back into himself, out of the fog of his mind. "Lo, did you sleep at all last night?" I, I slept for an hour or two," he admitted, eyes glancing down. He was ashamed of his own insomnia sometimes, but being a double major was draining. Luckily, Janice always knew how to take care of him, make him realize that there was more to the world than just romantic love. "How much more schoolwork do you need to get done?" Janice asked, rhetorically, as he grabbed Logan's planner, flipping to the page for the day. Not much. Plus it's only Saturday morning." "Okay." He closed the planner and then shut Logan's laptop and then his own. "Come on, we're going to the apartment to rest." "Jan, not mine, because Virgil and Roman are practicing and I want to give them space," he explained, putting the laptop away. "No arguing this time, please. You need to take care of yourself." Logan knew better than to argue, so he packed up his things and then the two walked to his apartment, fingers interlocked. "Janice, this really isn't necessary," Logan grumbled as his partner removed his tie and unbuttoned his shirt, revealing the plain t-shirt underneath. "I need to get work done." The shorter man ignored him, going to Logan's dresser and pulling out some pajama bottoms. He threw them at his glasses-clad partner, raising an eyebrow. "You need to rest," was the only thing he said before resting his hands on his hips, glancing around the cluttered bedroom. There were papers littering the carpet, books stacked everywhere despite the open spaces on the bookshelves, and empty coffee mugs all over his desk. And Janice noted some spilled coffee stains on the surface. He was about to shrug out of his coat when two arms wrapped around his waist and Logan's chin rested on his shoulder. "You could help me rest, maybe," he suggested, voice low. "It helps my mind slow down a little bit." Janice knew this, and he spun around in Logan's arms, pressing his hands to his partner's face. "If you don't want to, you know I'd do anything to help you, Lolo." Afterwards, Janice slipped back into his shirt and a pair of Logan's pajama bottoms. He got Logan's help in rubbing lotion over the left side of his body, hoping to quell some of the pain brought on by his eczema. Then he brought over his laptop, putting on one of Logan's favorite space documentaries, and the two snuggled, Logan dozing sporadically. Janice ran his fingers through the other's hair, feeling calm and collected, a smile plastered on his face. When he heard Logan's stomach rumble with hunger, they ordered Chinese takeout and ate it in bed, Janice smirking when a noodle stuck to the other's chin. They watched a few more documentaries, the sun lowering itself in the sky, and eventually Logan dozed off. Janice pressed a swift kiss to Logan's forehead, the other softly snoring, then got to work tidying up the room. He started by putting the books onto the shelves, but he didn't follow a certain order. He just wanted to reduce Logan's risk of falling over the stacks. Afterwards, he organized the scattered papers into different piles and then put them into the file cabinet, labeling them for the class or purpose they held. He wiped off the surfaces in the room with wipes he had stored in Logan's desk, and then carried all of the mugs in his arms and out to the kitchenette. When he exited Logan's room, he saw Roman lounging on the couch, flipping through the script. When the actor noticed him, he raised an eyebrow, but smiled. "How's Virgil doing?" Janice asked, setting the mugs on the sink and turning on the hot water. Roman got up from the couch and sat on one of the stools at the counter, watching. Roman sighed, resting his hand under his chin. "He's nervous about it all, of course. He doesn't want to fall on stage. He doesn't want to mess up." His voice was hesitant, and Janice could tell he was holding something back. But he didn't want to pry. He focused on watching Logan's mugs, smiling when he noticed the ones he had gifted him with nerd sayings on them. "Janice, did he really almost kill himself?" The mug that Janice was holding slipped out of his hands, clattering into the sink. Thankfully, it stayed intact. He felt his throat constrict, the memories of that day rushing back through his mind, and he gripped the edge of the sink tightly, using one of his shaky hands to turn off the water. He did. Janice's breath was heavy too, but he couldn't bear to turn around to look Roman in the eyes. I found him. It was the worst day of my life. How old were you at the time? Roman's voice sounded pained as the words left his mouth, and Janice chewed on his lower lip. We were 16, he said, turning around and leaning against the sink, his eyes focused on his feet. He's better now. Therapy and medication and all. But I almost lost him. He thinks he's losing you. Roman's words came out before he could stop them, and Janice's eyes snapped up to meet his, a frown on his face. What? It was almost a hiss. Janice was feeling constricted again, and his defenses were rising. Roman held his hands out to try and calm him down. Roman sighed, lowering his hands. Now that you're in a partnership with Logan, he thinks he's not a priority in your life anymore. I did my best to tell him that couldn't be true, but you might need to talk to him. Janice ran a hand through his hair, sighing, but he nodded. Thank you for telling me, Roman. I'll talk to him. Roman nodded, then pursed his lips in thought. Our audition is a week from Friday. Do you think that maybe you and the others could sit in the back, where Virgil can't see, and then be there when we're done? Roman's voice was hesitant. He didn't know Janice very well, and had only spent time with him in small increments. It was Patton and Logan who spent more time with him, and Roman always found the sociology major to be odd. But he meant a lot to Virgil. He's so nervous. I think he could do with some support afterwards. Janice wondered why Roman was hesitant to be the only one providing the support to Virgil, but maybe it was a sign that Roman knew of his own limits. Yeah, of course, Roman. I'll make sure that we're there. Virgil? Janice opened the door to their apartment later that night. Remus hadn't returned yet, and Virgil was laying on the couch, holding a pillow close. Janice stepped out of his shoes and set his bag down, walking over. I think we need to talk. Do we? Virgil made a move to sit up, but Janice shook his head, pulling Virgil's legs up and onto his lap as he sat down. Roman told me that you feel like less of a priority to me, he said, eyes focusing on the taller man. Virgil's mouth opened to respond, but Janice shook his head. Virg, I need you to know that no matter how significant Lo, or anyone else, ever becomes to me, no one will ever be more important to me than you, okay? Virgil looked away, frowning, and Janice sighed, rubbing his feet. It's just... He took a deep breath, twisting his fingers in a manner that seemed very uncomfortable to Janice, but Virgil made no indication that it was. You've got someone to care for now, someone who cares for you in an equal manner. And I'm just getting in the way. V, you could never get in the way. Just because I'm with Logan doesn't change the fact that if you needed me, I would drop everything to be there. Janice's voice was calm, and he rubbed Virgil's feet and legs in a way that he hoped was comforting. V, look at me. Virgil did, because he knew that Janice would keep at it until he did. Janice smiled warmly, his eyes meeting his best friend's. Please don't forget how much I care for you. I know things have changed lately. I'm still figuring out the balance with Lo and everything. But you'll always be at the top of my priority pyramid. Virgil smiled, recalling the drawing that Janice has made for him back when he was in the hospital for his attempt. Flashback, 6 years ago. They don't care, they never did. Virgil was sitting up in the hospital bed. Finally, bandage-covered arms crossed in a frown on his face. His parents had just left from their obligatory half-hour visit. Not a priority to anyone. Janice scoffed. He was sitting cross-legged at the foot of the bed, notebook in hand. You're a priority to me, V, he said, starting to scribble on the notebook. Virgil raised an eyebrow, peeking over to see a pyramid with words on several levels. Okay, see? Bottom level is basic necessities like a roof and food, then school and my family, then me. And look, at the very top of the pyramid, it's you. The most important thing. Virgil brought his hand up to his mouth to stifle the laugh that he felt rising up inside him, and he ignored the bandages on his wrist as he did so. Janice was surprised at the laughter. He hadn't heard the noise coming from his best friend in weeks. Jan, the most important and necessary thing goes at the base of the pyramid, like in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Janice frowned, glancing down at his pyramid. Virgil reached his hand out, taking the notebook from him. But I understand what you're trying to say. Thank you. End flashback. I still have that pyramid drawing you did, Virgil said. He moved from his laying down position to sit next to Janice, and despite their height difference, he leaned his head on the other man's shoulder. Maybe I don't need to rely on only you, Jay. What do you mean? Janice found himself not liking the idea. Of course, ever since Remus had pranced his way into their little group, into their apartment, Janice knew that it could never be the same as it was when they moved in together right out of high school instead of living in the dorms. Virgil took a deep breath, a small smile taking over his facial features. Maybe Roman will care for me too. Janice turned his head a bit to give Virgil a confused look. I think he likes me. He'd be a fool not to, was the only response that Janice could muster up, but he felt strange about the whole thing. Janice had just finished eating his breakfast when there was a knock at the door. Virgil was still in bed, and Remus had left early to go on a brunch date with Patton. He opened the door and saw Logan standing there, a sheepish smile on his face. "Hey, Lo, you okay?" he asked, pulling his partner inside and giving him a swift kiss to the cheek. "I just wanted to spend time with you," Logan explained. Janice smiled, pulling him in for a warming hug. They moved to sit on the couch, Janice curled into Logan's chest, an oceanography documentary playing in the background. I was, thinking about the day we decided to get together. Oh? Janice mused, playing with Logan's fingers gently. What about that day? Just the way you made me feel like I wasn't broken, like I deserve happiness. Flashback to early in the summer. I can't help but feel broken. Logan sighed, laying on the floor of Janice's room. I know being a romantic is valid. You've helped me realize that, Janice, but seeing people in romantic relationships they always seem so happy, and will I ever feel happy like that? Janice sighed from where he was propped up on his bed, pillows surrounding him. He clambered out of bed and then laid on the floor next to Logan, taking his hand and intertwining their fingers. You deserve the utmost of happiness. Regardless of what other people think, people like you and me do find happiness in our lives, even if romantic relationships aren't appealing to us, he said, voice soft and soothing. A few moments passed before he spoke again. Logan, do you know what a queer platonic relationship is? Vaguely, Logan asked, turning his head to look at the other, who was staring right up at the ceiling. Why do you ask? Well, I thought maybe you'd... Janice didn't finish his sentence, instead closing his eyes and taking a deep breath. Logan propped himself on his elbow, laying on his side to look at the other one more closely. Janice, are you asking me to be your partner? Logan asked. They'd grown closer since meeting in class and getting to know each other. And when Janice found out that he also identified as aromantic, they began to spend even more time together. Yeah, I think so, Janice replied, looking at Logan again. We'd need to establish boundaries, but I don't know. I think it could work, and maybe we could make each other happy. What kind of boundaries? Logan pressed, not yet stating if he wanted to enter the partnership. Like, sex stuff? I mean, only if you want that. We don't have to do any of that, and if there's something you want, we can try it, and if it makes us uncomfortable, we stop. It's all subjective to change. Janice kept tripping over his words. He'd been thinking of asking Logan this for months, and had planned so many things out to say, but Logan never ceased to amaze him with the questions he didn't anticipate. Well, Logan started, taking a deep breath, I would like to try, because you deserve to be happy too, Janice. End flashback. Anyways, I have something for you. Logan reached into the pocket of his jeans and pulled out a rounded ring that looked like a galaxy. You don't have to, but, it's kind of like a promise ring? Janice took the ring into his own hands gingerly, a smile creeping onto his face. Logan nodded, then buried his face in Janice's hair, mumbling. The smaller man said nothing, but slipped the ring onto his finger. You make me feel happiness, Logan said, face still buried in Janice's hair. I thought I couldn't feel that I didn't deserve it. But you and I deserve it just as much as anyone else.